I never thought my own son would say those words to me. Not Michael. Not the boy I carried for 9 months, not the child I stayed up with through countless fevers and nightmares, not the man I sacrificed everything for. But there he stood in my living room, the one I'd paid for with 30 years of working double shifts, looking at me with those cold, distant eyes that belonged to a stranger. "If you don't want to go to the nursing home, get a job, Mom." His voice was flat, matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces right there, but I just smiled. What else could I do? I smiled because I didn't want him to see how much it hurt. I smiled because somewhere deep inside, I still believed this was temporary, that my Michael was still in there somewhere. I smiled because the alternative was to fall apart completely, and I had already fallen apart too many times in my 72 years of life. The car that stopped outside my window that same afternoon changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I got here, to this moment of standing in my own home, being told by my own flesh and blood that I was a burden he no longer wanted to carry. My name is Alith Hayes, though everyone used to call me Ellie. Used to. That was back when I had friends, when I had a life, when I mattered to someone. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the daughter of a factory worker and a seamstress. We didn't have much, but we had love. God, we had so much love. My mother would sing while she sewed, and my father would dance with her in our tiny kitchen on Sunday evenings. They taught me that love was the most important thing in the world. That family was everything. That you sacrificed for the people you loved because that's what made life meaningful. I met Richard Hayes when I was 19 years old. He was 22, fresh out of the army, with dark hair that fell over his forehead and a smile that made my stomach flip. We met at a church social, and I swear to God, I knew the moment I saw him that he was going to be my husband. We courted for 6 months, proper courting, not like kids today, and married in the spring of 1971. I wore my mother's wedding dress, altered to fit me, and Richard wore his only suit. We had $17 between us when we started our life together. $17 and a whole world of dreams. The first years were hard but beautiful. Richard worked construction while I cleaned houses during the day and waitressed at night. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery, and every morning I'd wake up to the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of Richard's arm around me. We were building something, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. We were building a future. Michael came along in 1973. I'll never forget holding him for the first time, this tiny perfect creature with Richard's eyes and my nose. I counted his fingers and toes over and over, unable to believe that we had created something so beautiful. Richard cried when he held his son, big, tough Richard who never showed emotion, tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "I'm going to give you everything, son. Everything I never had." And he tried. God, he tried so hard. Richard worked himself to the bone to provide for us. I quit my jobs to stay home with Michael because that's what we believed was right, what we could finally afford. I threw myself into motherhood with everything I had. I made homemade baby food, sewed Michael's clothes, read to him for hours. Every milestone felt like a miracle. His first word, Mama. His first steps into my waiting arms. His first day of school, I cried more than he did. Richard's construction business started to grow when Michael was 5. He hired a crew, took on bigger projects. We were finally comfortable. We bought a small house in the suburbs, 3 bedrooms, a yard, a white picket fence. It sounds like a cliché, but it was our dream come true. I planted roses by the front porch and tomatoes in the back. Michael had a swing set and a sandbox. We had family barbecues on Sundays. Life was good. Life was really, really good. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. Michael was 7 when Richard started coming home late. At first, it was just once or twice a week, big projects, he said, demanding clients. I believed him because why wouldn't I? We had built our marriage on trust. But the late nights became more frequent. The smell of perfume on his shirts, the lipstick stain he didn't notice on his collar, the way he pulled away when I tried to kiss him. I noticed all of it, but I pretended I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure, stupid. The truth came out on a Tuesday afternoon. I'll never forget it was a Tuesday because that was the day I always did the grocery shopping. I had forgot my wallet and came home to get it. Richard's truck was in the driveway. That's when I heard her. The sounds coming from our bedroom, from our bed, the bed where we had conceived our son, where we had held each other through good times and bad. I stood in the hallway, frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to believe what I was hearing. I never went into the bedroom. I just left. I took Michael from school, drove to my mother's house, and cried for 3 days straight. My mother held me and said nothing because there was nothing to say. Some pains are too deep for words. Richard came to get us, full of apologies and promises. It was a mistake, he said. It meant nothing, he said. He loved me, he said. He'd never do it again. I wanted to believe him. For Michael's sake, I wanted to believe him, so I went back. I forgave him, or at least I tried to. But something had broken inside me that day, something that could never be fully repaired. Things were different after that. We were polite to each other, cordial even, but the warmth was gone. The intimacy, the trust. We became roommates who happened to share a child. We stayed together for Michael because that's what you did. You didn't give up on your marriage. You didn't deprive your child of a father. You sacrificed your happiness for your family. Michael never knew. We made sure of that. We smiled at his school plays, cheered at his baseball games, celebrated his birthdays with cake and presents. We played the part of the happy family even as our marriage slowly died behind closed doors. Richard died when Michael was 17, a heart attack on a job site. He was only 48 years old. The funeral was packed with people, clients, workers, friends I didn't know he had. They all told me what a great man he was, what a loss this was. I stood there in my black dress, Michael beside me, and I felt nothing, or maybe I felt too much to process it all. Grief, yes, but also anger. Anger that he had betrayed me and I had forgiven him. Anger that we had wasted so many years in a hollow marriage. Anger that he was gone before we could ever find our way back to each other, if that was even possible. The life insurance money was substantial. Richard, whatever his faults, had made sure we were taken care of. I used it to pay off the house and put Michael through college. That was my job now, being both mother and father, making sure Michael had every opportunity, every advantage. I worked as a receptionist at a dental office, not because we needed the money, but because I needed something to do, some reason to get up in the morning. Michael thrived in college. He was smart, so smart and driven in a way I had never been. He studied business and economics, got internships with big companies, wore suits that cost more than my monthly salary. I was so proud of him. So proud and so hopeful that his life would be different from mine, that he would find real love, real happiness, real success. He met Jennifer in his senior year. She was beautiful, blonde, polished from a wealthy family in Connecticut. I knew the first time I met her that she thought she was better than us, better than me. The way she looked around my house, at my second-hand furniture and outdated kitchen. The way she smiled, polite but cold. The way she called me Mrs. Hayes instead of Ellie or Mom, maintaining that formal distance. I tried to warm up to her. I really did. I invited them for dinner, asked about her family, complimented her clothes. But Jennifer remained aloof and Michael started changing. He started correcting my grammar, making jokes about my small-town ways, acting embarrassed when I didn't know what wine to order at fancy restaurants. He was pulling away from me, and Jennifer was helping him do it. They married right after graduation. It was a huge wedding in Connecticut, 300 guests, a country club, an 8-tier cake. I wore a dress I bought off the clearance rack and felt out of place the entire time. No one talked to me except out of obligation. Jennifer's mother looked at me like I was something stuck to her shoe, but I smiled. I smiled and told everyone how happy I was for them because that's what you do. You support your child no matter what. Michael got a high-powered job in finance in New York. They bought a condo in Manhattan that cost more than I could comprehend. I visited once, just once. Jennifer made it clear I wasn't really welcome. The guest room was full of storage boxes. The whole apartment was white and sterile and cold, just like her. I went back home after 3 days instead of the week I had planned, making up an excuse about work. After that, our relationship became phone calls, short, infrequent phone calls where Michael sounded distracted and busy. He'd ask how I was, I'd say fine, he'd say he had to go. Sometimes months would pass without hearing from him. I told myself he was just busy, building his career, building his life. I told myself this was normal, that adult children grew apart from their parents. But it hurt. God, it hurt so much. Then Jennifer got pregnant. Michael called to tell me, and I could hear the joy in his voice, real joy, the kind I hadn't heard in years. I was going to be a grandmother. Maybe this would bring us closer again. Maybe this would remind Michael where he came from, what really mattered. Sophie was born on a rainy October morning. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a head full of dark hair. I took the train to New York the day after she was born. When I walked into that hospital room and saw my son holding his daughter, I cried. Happy tears, sad tears, complicated tears for all the years and all the pain and all the love that never stopped despite everything. "Hi, Mom," Michael said, and for a moment, just a moment, he was my little boy again. I held Sophie and fell completely in love. This tiny person who shared my blood, my history. I wanted to be part of her life so badly it physically ached. I wanted to be the kind of grandmother my mother had been, present, loving, involved. But Jennifer had other ideas. She made it clear that I could visit but only when invited, that I couldn't just drop by, that they had a very specific routine and schedule for Sophie. That Jennifer's mother, who lived in Connecticut and had plenty of money and connections, would be the primary grandmother. I was, supplementary, an occasional visitor, the lesser grandmother. I bit my tongue and accepted it because what choice did I have? I sent gifts for every holiday, every birthday. I called to talk to Sophie even though she was too young to talk back. I loved that little girl with everything I had, from a distance that broke my heart a little more each day. The years passed. Sophie grew from baby to toddler to little girl. I saw her maybe 3 or 4 times a year if I was lucky. In photos Michael posted online, I watched her grow up in pixels and pretense. Birthday parties I wasn't invited to. School plays I didn't know about. Family vacations where I was never included. Jennifer's mother was in all the photos. Grandma Patricia with her expensive clothes and her perfect smile, holding Sophie, reading to Sophie, being the grandmother I desperately wanted to be. I tried to talk to Michael about it once. "I just wish I could see Sophie more often," I said during one of our rare phone calls. "I miss her, I miss you." "Mom, we've talked about this," he said, his voice tight with annoyance. "We're really busy. Sophie has activities, we have work. You can't expect us to drop everything just because you're lonely." Lonely? He said it like it was a character flaw, something shameful. Yes, I was lonely. I had been lonely since his father died, since he moved away, since my whole life became about missing people who were still alive but unreachable. I retired from the dental office when I was 68. My hands were getting arthritic, and the long days were becoming too much. I had savings, not a lot, but enough to live modestly. I thought maybe retirement would be nice. I could volunteer, take classes, travel a little. I could finally focus on myself after a lifetime of focusing on everyone else. But retirement was just empty, long days with nothing to fill them. I'd wake up and have nowhere to go, no one to talk to. Most of my friends had either moved away or died. The house felt too big and too quiet. I'd sit in the living room and remember all the life that used to fill these walls: Michael's laughter, Richard's footsteps, the TV playing, dinner cooking. Now it was just silence and memories. I started having health problems around 70. Nothing catastrophic, just the usual aging issues: high blood pressure, arthritis, some memory problems. I managed with medication and doctor's appointments. I was still independent, still taking care of myself. I wasn't ready to be old, not really. I still felt like me inside, like Ellie who had dreams and desires and purpose. Then I fell. It was stupid. I was reaching for something in the kitchen cupboard and lost my balance. I broke my hip and spent 3 weeks in the hospital, followed by 2 months in rehab. Michael came to visit twice in all that time. He'd stay for an hour, ask if I was okay, tell me about Sophie's on her roll or Jennifer's promotion, and then leave because he had to catch a train back to the city. I couldn't live alone after that, not safely. The doctor said I needed help, at least temporarily. I asked Michael if I could come stay with them, just until I was fully recovered. Just a few months. "Mom, that's not possible," he said. "We don't have room. Sophie needs her space. Jennifer is stressed enough with work. I'm sorry, but you'll have to figure something else out." Figure something else out. I had given him everything, every dollar, every moment, every dream I ever had, and he told me to figure something else out. I hired a home health aide, a kind woman named Maria who came 3 times a week to help me with bathing and cleaning and cooking. It was expensive, eating through my savings faster than I wanted to think about. But what choice did I have? I couldn't ask Michael for help. I couldn't be a burden. I recovered slowly. The hip healed, but I was never quite the same. I walked with a cane now. Stairs were difficult. I couldn't drive anymore, my reflexes weren't what they used to be, and I was terrified of hurting someone. My world shrank to the size of my house and the small radius I could walk. Maria became my primary human contact. How sad is that? The only person who talked to me with kindness was someone I paid to care. Sophie turned 12. I sent her a card and a check, the same thing I did every year. She sent back a thank you note, clearly written under Jennifer's supervision. That was polite and distant and heartbreaking. Did she even know me? Did she know that I thought about her every single day? That I had a box of gifts I'd collected for her over the years, waiting for visits that never happened? Michael called me on my 72nd birthday. It wasn't a long call, 10 minutes maybe. He sounded tired. He told me things were stressful at work, that Jennifer wanted to renovate the condo, that Sophie was applying to private high schools. Everything in his life sounded expensive and complicated and very far away from me. "How are you, Mom?" he asked, the question clearly obligatory. "I'm okay," I lied. "Just the usual aches and pains." "That's good. Listen, I have a meeting in 5 minutes, but I wanted to call and wish you happy birthday. Love you." And he was gone. "Love you," he said, like it was punctuation, meaningless syllables to end a conversation. Did he love me? Did he even think about me when I wasn't on the phone? Did he lie awake at night wondering if I was okay, the way I did about him? My savings were running out. The reality hit me one Tuesday morning when I was paying bills and realized that at the current rate, I had maybe a year left before I was broke. The house was paid off, but there were still property taxes, utilities, medical bills, Maria's salary. I needed to do something, but what? I was 72 years old with arthritis and a bad hip. Who would hire me? Who would want me? I called Michael because I didn't know what else to do. "I need to talk to you about something," I said. "It's about money." I could feel him tense over the phone. "What about money?" "I'm running out. The medical expenses, the home health aid. I'm going through my savings faster than I expected. I don't know what to do." There was a long silence. "Mom, I can't support you financially. Jennifer and I have our own expenses. Sophie's education alone is going to cost a fortune. We've talked about this. You need to budget better." Budget better? I had been budgeting my entire life. I had stretched every dollar until it screamed. I had sacrificed everything so he could have opportunities I never had. And now he was telling me to budget better. "I'm not asking you to support me," I said, my voice shaking. I don't know what my options are. I thought maybe you could help me figure something out." Another silence. Then, "Have you thought about selling the house, moving somewhere smaller, or maybe one of those senior living facilities?" A senior living facility. He meant a nursing home. He meant putting me away somewhere so I wouldn't be his problem anymore. "I don't want to leave my home," I whispered. "This is where I raised you, where all my memories are." "Mom, you have to be practical. You can't afford to keep living there. You can't take care of yourself properly. It's not sustainable." Sustainable, like I was a business model that wasn't profitable anymore. We ended the call without resolution. I sat in my living room, the same living room where Michael had taken his first steps, where we had opened Christmas presents, where I had cried into my mother's shoulder after Richard's betrayal. How could I leave this house? How could I let go of the only thing I had left? But Michael was right about one thing. I couldn't sustain this much longer. Maria alone cost $1,500 a month. I started looking into cheaper options, but everything was either too expensive or too depressing or too far from the few connections I still had. That's when Michael showed up unannounced one Saturday morning, Jennifer and Sophie in tow. My heart leaped when I opened the door and saw them. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he was here to tell me they'd figured something out, that I could come live with them, that I was still family. "Hi, Mom," Michael said, kissing my cheek. The kiss felt obligatory, cold. They came inside, and I noticed how Jennifer looked around with barely concealed disgust. Yes, the house was old. Yes, the furniture was dated. But it was clean, and it was mine, and it was full of love even if no one else could see it. Sophie had grown so much. She was almost as tall as me now, a beautiful girl turning into a beautiful woman. "Hi, Grandma," she said politely, and then immediately looked at her phone. I made coffee and tea, brought out cookies I had baked just in case they visited. We sat in the living room, making awkward small talk. Jennifer kept checking her watch. Sophie never looked up from her phone. Michael seemed nervous, fidgeting with his coffee cup. Finally, he said, "Mom, we need to talk about your living situation." My heart sank. Here it was, the real reason for the visit. "Jennifer and I have been discussing it, and we think it's time you considered moving to an assisted living facility. We've done some research, and there are some really nice ones that aren't too expensive. You'd have people around, activities, medical care on site. It would be better for you." Better for me? He meant better for him. Better than having to worry about his aging mother, better than guilt, better than responsibility. "I don't want to go to a nursing home," I said quietly. "It's not a nursing home, Mom. It's assisted living. There's a difference. I want to stay in my house." "You can't afford to stay in your house," Michael said, his voice taking on an edge. "We've been over this. You're being stubborn and impractical." "This is my home," I said, my voice breaking. "I've lived here for 40 years, your father and I." "Dad is dead, Mom. He's been dead for 25 years. You can't keep clinging to the past. You have to face reality." The words hit me like physical blows. Jennifer was nodding in agreement. Sophie was still looking at her phone, completely disconnected from this conversation that was deciding my entire future. "What if I got a job?" I said suddenly. The idea came out of nowhere, but once I said it, I clung to it like a life raft. I could work part-time, earn some money, make the savings last longer. Michael actually laughed. "Mom, you're 72 years old. You can barely walk. Who's going to hire you?" "I can walk fine with my cane. I'm not helpless. I could work at a store or answer phones or—" "This is ridiculous," Jennifer interjected, speaking for the first time. "Michael, you need to be firm with her. She's not thinking clearly." Not thinking clearly. Like I was senile, incompetent, a child who needed to be managed. "I'm thinking perfectly clearly," I said, anger finally cutting through the hurt. "What's not clear is how my son can sit in my home and tell me I need to leave it. How he can look at me and feel nothing." "That's not fair," Michael said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm trying to do what's best for you." "What's best for me is to be with my family. What's best for me is to know my granddaughter, to have my son visit more than twice a year. What's best for me is to not die alone in some facility surrounded by strangers." "You're being dramatic," Jennifer said. "People in assisted living are very happy. They have full social lives." I looked at this woman, this cold, selfish woman who had taken my son away from me piece by piece, and I hated her. I hated her with an intensity that scared me. "Get out," I said quietly. "Mom," Michael started. "Get out of my house, all of you." "You're being unreasonable," Michael said, standing up. "We're trying to help you." "If you want to help me, then help me. Be my son. Bring my granddaughter to visit. Call me more than once a month. Care about me. But don't come here and tell me to leave my home so you can feel less guilty about abandoning me." The words hung in the air. Sophie looked up from her phone, her eyes wide. Jennifer's face was red with anger. Michael looked, I don't know, hurt, angry, guilty. I couldn't read him anymore. He had become a stranger. "Fine," Michael said coldly. "Stay in your house, drain your savings, end up with nothing, but don't call me when you need help because I'm done. I'm done with your guilt trips and your martyrdom. You've made your choice." They left. Michael and Jennifer stormed out, and Sophie followed, glancing back at me once with an expression I couldn't decipher. The door slammed, and I was alone again in my living room, my home, my prison. I sat there for hours, crying until I had no tears left. What had I done? Had I just cut off my only connection to my son, my granddaughter? But what was I supposed to do? Accept being thrown away like garbage? Accept that my only value was in staying out of the way? 2 weeks later, Michael came back, alone this time. I opened the door and we looked at each other, this man I had created, this stranger who wore my son's face. "I'm sorry for what I said," he said, but his voice was flat like he was reading from a script. That was wrong. "Come in," I said. We sat in the living room again, that same space where we'd had our fight. The tension was thick enough to cut. "Have you thought any more about the assisted living option?" he asked. "No," I said. "I told you I want to stay here." He sighed, rubbing his face with his hands. "Mom, I can't keep having this same conversation. You're not being realistic about your situation." "Then let me try," I said. "Let me get a job. Let me prove I can make this work. You're 72. I know how old I am, I snapped. I may be old, but I'm not dead yet. I'm not useless yet. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Resignation, maybe, or maybe just exhaustion. He was tired of dealing with me, tired of this problem I had become. Fine, he said. If you don't want to go to the nursing home, get a job. There it was, the ultimatum, the gauntlet thrown down. Get a job or get out. Prove your worth or accept being discarded. I will, I said, lifting my chin defiantly even as my heart broke into even smaller pieces. I'll get a job, and I'll show you that I'm not a burden. Good, he said, standing up. I hope it works out for you, Mom, I really do. He left again, and I sat there wondering if I had just made a terrible mistake. Who was I kidding? I was a 72-year-old woman with limited mobility and no recent work experience. Who would hire me? How would I even find a job? The internet was a foreign country to me. I didn't know how to use job websites or write a resume or any of that. I was from a generation where you walked into a store and asked if they were hiring. But I had to try. I had to try because the alternative was giving up, and I wasn't ready to give up yet. I wasn't ready to stop being Alith Hayes and become just another old woman warehoused in a facility until she died. That afternoon, I stood at my living room window, leaning on my cane, watching the world outside. Watching cars pass, people walk by, life happening without me. And that's when I saw it, a black town car pulling up in front of my house. Not a typical car for this neighborhood. The window rolled down and a woman's face appeared, looking directly at me. She was maybe 60, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and kind eyes behind expensive-looking glasses. We stared at each other for a moment, two women across a divide of glass and distance and circumstance. Then she smiled at me, a real smile, warm and genuine. She raised her hand in a small wave. I waved back, confused, but somehow comforted by this small moment of human connection with a stranger. The car window rolled back up, but instead of driving away, the car just sat there. The woman was making a phone call I could see through the windshield. She talked for several minutes, gesturing occasionally, glancing at my house periodically. What was happening? Was she lost? Looking for someone? My confusion deepened when she ended the call, opened the car door, and started walking up my front path. My heart started beating faster. Was this some kind of scam? You heard about people targeting elderly people, earning their trust, and then robbing them. But something about her seemed safe. She moved with confidence but not aggression, dressed in a beautiful blue suit that spoke of wealth but not ostentation. The doorbell rang. I stood there for a moment, cane in hand, debating. Then I thought, what did I have to lose anymore? I opened the door. Hello, she said, her voice as warm as her smile had been. My name is Catherine Brennan. I know this is going to sound very strange, but I need to talk to you about something important. May I come in? Every instinct should have told me to say no, to close the door on this stranger. But there was something about her, something in her eyes that spoke of kindness, of understanding, of shared pain that recognized its reflection in another person. I'm Alith Hayes, I said, stepping back. Come in. She entered my home, and I noticed how she looked around, not with Jennifer's barely concealed contempt, but with appreciation. She touched the photo frames on the console table, looked at the framed needlepoint on the walls that I had made years ago. You have a beautiful home, she said. You can feel the love in it. Tears sprang to my eyes unbidden. When was the last time someone had said something kind to me? We sat in my living room, her on the couch and me in my chair. She declined my offer of coffee or tea. Instead, she leaned forward, her hands clasped together, and looked at me with an intensity that was both unsettling and oddly comforting. Alith, she said, I'm going to tell you something that might sound crazy, but I need you to listen. I was driving past your house. I live 3 streets over, and I saw you in the window. Just standing there, looking so sad, so alone, and I felt compelled to stop. I know how that sounds, but I believe in following intuition, especially when it's this strong. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. I saw something in your face, she continued. The same thing I see in my mirror every morning. Loneliness. The particular kind of loneliness that comes from being discarded by the people you love most. Am I right? The tears that had been threatening spilled over. I couldn't speak, so I just nodded again. I thought so, she said gently. I lost my husband 3 years ago, cancer. We had 2 children, a son and a daughter. After Thomas died, they couldn't wait to divide up his estate and move on with their lives. They tried to put me in a retirement home too, said I was too old to live alone, that I needed supervision. What I needed was my children, but what I got was a lawyer's letter telling me they had been appointed to make decisions about my care. What did you do? I whispered. I fought, she said simply. I had resources, Thomas had been successful, and he made sure I was protected. I got my own lawyer, proved I was of sound mind, kept my independence. But I learned something in that fight. I learned that loneliness is the real killer of our generation. Not disease, not old age, loneliness. Being made to feel worthless, invisible, like we've outlived our purpose. That's exactly how I feel, I said, the words tumbling out. And then, I don't know why, I told her everything. I told her about Richard and his betrayal, about Michael and Jennifer, about Sophie growing up without knowing me, about the ultimatum Michael had given me just an hour before. I told this complete stranger things I had never told anyone, and she listened, really listened, without judgment or pity, just understanding. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me thoughtfully. Eleanor, what if I told you I could solve your immediate problem? What do you mean? You need a job, right? To prove you can support yourself, to maintain your independence. Yes, but who would hire me? I'm 72, I walk with a cane, I haven't worked in 4 years. I would hire you, she said. I stared at her. You, but doing what? I run a small nonprofit, she explained. The Thomas Brennan Foundation. We provide support services for elderly people, helping them navigate healthcare, providing companionship services, advocating for better treatment in care facilities. It was Thomas's dream, and I made it real after he died. I need someone to help in our office answering phones, organizing files, talking to clients. Nothing physically demanding, but very important work. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. Because someone needs to, she said simply. Because I can. Because I saw you in that window and I thought, there but for the grace of God. And because I believe that we're put in each other's paths for a reason. I don't know what to say. Say yes, she said, smiling. Say yes and come work for me. The pay isn't much, $15 an hour, 20 hours a week, but it's something. It's independence. It's purpose. It's proof that you still matter. 20 hours a week at $15 an hour. That was $1,200 a month. Not a fortune, but enough to make a real difference in extending my savings, in proving to Michael that I could take care of myself. When would I start? I asked, barely believing this was happening. Monday, if you're ready. I'll pick you up myself, 9 in the morning. No need to worry about transportation. Catherine, I said, my voice shaking, why are you really doing this? She was quiet for a moment, and I saw her eyes get misty. Because 3 years ago, when I was fighting my children for my independence, a stranger helped me. A lawyer who took my case pro bono because she said her own mother had been railroaded into a nursing home against her will. She told me to pay it forward someday. So that's what I'm doing, paying it forward. We sat together in my living room as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, 2 women who had been beaten down by life and family, but who refused to stop fighting. She told me more about the foundation, about the clients they served, about the difference they were making. And for the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt something stir inside me that I had thought was long dead. Hope. Catherine left an hour later, but not before giving me her phone number, the address of the foundation office, and a hug that felt more genuine than any embrace I'd gotten from my own son in years. After she left, I sat in my chair and cried. Not tears of sadness this time, but something more complicated. Relief, gratitude, disbelief, hope all tangled together. A stranger had shown me more kindness in one afternoon than my own family had shown me in years. What did that say about my life? About the choices I had made? I called Michael that evening. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice distracted. Mom, I'm in the middle of something. I got a job, I said. Silence, then what? I got a job, starting Monday. 20 hours a week, $15 an hour. I'm going to be working for a nonprofit that helps elderly people. More silence. I could almost hear him recalculating, reassessing. That's That's great, Mom. How did you? Someone offered me a position, I said, not explaining further. Let him wonder. Let him think about how a stranger had done more for his mother in 1 hour than he had done in years. So you don't have to worry about me anymore. I'm taking care of myself. I wasn't worried, he said, but we both knew he was lying. He had been worried that I would become his responsibility, his burden, his problem to solve. I know, I said quietly. Good night, Michael. Mom, wait. But I hung up. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my son, and it felt powerful, like I was taking back some small piece of myself that I had given away so many years ago. That weekend, I prepared for my new job like it was the most important thing I had ever done. I went through my closet, finding the nicest clothes I owned that still fit. I practiced walking with my cane, building up my stamina. I felt nervous and excited and terrified all at once. What if I couldn't do the work? What if I was too slow, too old, too broken? But Monday morning, when Catherine pulled up in front of my house at exactly 9 o'clock, I was ready. I locked my front door and walked down the path to her car, and I felt like I was walking toward a new life. The Thomas Brennan Foundation was located in a small office building downtown. The office itself was modest, 3 rooms filled with filing cabinets, desks, computers, and photographs of smiling elderly people. There were 2 other employees, a middle-aged woman named Sarah who managed programs, and a young man named David who handled outreach and technology. They welcomed me warmly, without any of the skepticism I had feared. Catherine showed me my desk, my computer, my phone. She walked me through the basic tasks, answering calls from clients, scheduling appointments, organizing intake files. It wasn't complicated work, but it was important work. Every call I answered was someone elderly, someone scared, someone who needed help navigating a system that seemed designed to warehouse them and forget them. I understood these people because I was one of these people. My first call was from an 80-year-old man named Harold whose family was trying to force him into a nursing home because they wanted to sell his house. His voice shook as he told me his story, and I found myself saying, I understand. I understand exactly what you're going through. And I meant it. That first week was exhausting. By the time Catherine drove me home each day, I was drained, physically and emotionally. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that comes from doing meaningful work. For the first time in years, I had a reason to get up in the morning. I had a purpose beyond simply existing. Michael called at the end of my first week. How's the job going? He asked, and I could hear the surprise in his voice, like he had expected me to fail, to give up, to prove him right. It's going well, I said. I'm helping people, it feels good. That's really great, Mom, he said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. Listen, I was thinking maybe we could come visit in a few weeks. Sophie has been asking about you. Sophie had been asking about me? I doubted that was true, but I didn't call him out on the lie. That would be nice, I said. Okay, I'll talk to Jennifer and we'll figure out a weekend. We hung up and I realized that something had shifted. By proving I didn't need him, I had somehow made him want to be around me more. How twisted was that? But I'd take it. I'd take whatever scraps of my son I could get. The months passed and I fell into a rhythm. Work 4 days a week, 5 hours a day. Come home tired but satisfied. Pay my bills with my paycheck and watch my savings slowly stabilize instead of draining away. Learn to use the computer better, learn the systems, learn how to help people navigate bureaucracy and advocate for themselves. Catherine became more than my boss, she became my friend. We'd have lunch together sometimes, talk about our lives, our children, our regrets. She told me about her husband Thomas, about the love they shared and the hole his death had left. I told her more about Richard, about the betrayal I had never fully processed, about how I had spent 30 years in a marriage that was a beautiful lie. Do you regret staying with him? She asked me one day. I thought about it for a long time. I don't know, I finally said. If I had left, Michael would have grown up in a broken home. He might have hated me for taking his father away. But staying broke something in me that never healed. So either way, there was loss. Either way, someone paid a price. That's the trap, isn't it? Catherine said softly. Women of our generation, we were taught that sacrifice was love, that giving up everything for our families was what made us good mothers, good wives. but nobody told us that you can sacrifice so much that you lose yourself completely. And then when your family doesn't appreciate the sacrifice, doesn't even recognize it, you're left with nothing. Not even yourself. Her words hit me like a physical blow because they were so absolutely true. I had sacrificed myself, my dreams, my happiness, my identity, and for what? For a son who couldn't wait to put me in a home, for a granddaughter who didn't know me, for a dead husband who had betrayed me. What do we do now? I asked. How do we get ourselves back? I don't know if we can, Catherine said. Not completely. Too much time has passed, too much has been lost. But maybe we can build something new, not who we were, but who we are now. Maybe that's enough. Michael, Jennifer, and Sophie did come visit a few weeks later. It was awkward. It was always awkward. But something was different this time. Sophie actually talked to me, told me about school and her friends. Michael asked about my job, seemed genuinely interested in the work I was doing. Even Jennifer was slightly less cold, though I suspected that was only because I was no longer a financial worry for them. We had dinner at a restaurant. They insisted on paying, which was good because it was expensive, and for a few hours we almost felt like a family. Almost. There was still distance there, still walls I didn't know how to break down, but it was something. It was more than I'd had before. After dinner, as they were leaving, Sophie hugged me. A real hug, not one of those stiff obligatory embraces. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," she whispered, "for getting the job." I held her tight, this beautiful girl who I barely knew but loved desperately, and whispered back, "Thank you, sweetheart." They drove away, and I stood on the sidewalk watching their car disappear into traffic. Catherine's words came back to me. Maybe that's enough. Maybe these small moments, these tiny connections, maybe they had to be enough because hopping for more just led to heartbreak. I worked at the foundation for 3 years. 3 years of answering phones and helping people and finding purpose in my old age. 3 years of friendship with Catherine, of slowly building a life that was mine instead of just the remnants of other people's lives. 3 years of gradual reconciliation with Michael, visits became slightly more frequent, phone calls lasted longer, walls came down inch by painful inch. Sophie graduated from 8th grade, started high school, grew into a remarkable young woman who sometimes called me just to talk. Not often, but sometimes. And sometimes was everything. My 75th birthday was different from any birthday I'd had in years. Catherine threw me a party at the office, cake, decorations, gifts. Sarah and David were there, along with several of the clients I had helped over the years. Harold, the 80-year-old man who had been my first call, brought me flowers and told me I had saved his life by helping him fight for his independence. And Michael came, just Michael, without Jennifer, with Sophie. He brought me a present, a framed photograph of me holding baby Michael, both of us smiling at each other with pure love in our eyes, a photograph I didn't even know existed. "I found this in some old boxes," he said. "I wanted you to have it, to remember." He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. To remember when we loved each other simply, completely, without complication or condition. To remember who we used to be before life and choices and pain carved canyons between us. "Thank you," I whispered, holding the photograph to my chest. "This means everything." That night, alone in my house, I looked at that photograph for hours. I looked at young Alina holding her baby boy, neither of them knowing what was coming, the betrayals, the losses, the loneliness, the distance. If I could go back and tell that young woman what her future held, would she still make the same choices? Would she still marry Richard, still sacrifice everything, still give and give until she was empty? I don't know, I honestly don't know. But I know this, that young woman in the photograph loved her son with everything she had. And somewhere deep inside, despite everything, I still did. Maybe that love had been taken for granted, exploited, ignored. Maybe it hadn't been returned the way I needed it to be. But it was still there, stubborn and unshakable, refusing to die no matter how much it was starved. Maybe that was my greatest weakness, or maybe it was my greatest strength. I still couldn't decide. The years kept moving. I turned 76, then 77. My health was declining, the inevitable slide of aging that no amount of positive attitude could stop. My arthritis got worse. I had a minor stroke that left me with some weakness on my left side. I started needing Maria's help more often again, cutting back my hours at the foundation to 3 days a week. Catherine was declining too. Her health had never been robust, and at 75, she was slowing down considerably. We talked sometimes about what would happen to the foundation when we were gone, how to ensure the work continued. "We should write a book," she joked one day. "The story of two old women who refused to go quietly into that good night." "Nobody would believe it," I said. "Maybe that's why we should write it, to prove we existed, to prove we mattered." On a cold November morning, just after I turned 78, I got the call every parent dreads. Michael had collapsed at work, a massive heart attack just like his father. He was only 50 years old. I took a taxi to the hospital, the fastest I've moved in years. Jennifer was already there, looking shocked and smaller than I'd ever seen her. Sophie was crying in the waiting room. I held my granddaughter while we waited for news, both of us shaking, both of us praying to whoever might listen. Michael survived, but it was close. The doctors said he would need surgery, lifestyle changes, stress reduction. He'd be in the hospital for weeks. I stayed. Every single day, I took a taxi to the hospital and sat by my son's bedside. Jennifer was there too, and for the first time, we weren't enemies. We were just two women who loved the same man, terrified of losing him. We talked during those long hospital hours, really talked for the first time ever. She told me about her childhood, about her own mother's coldness, about how she had learned to protect herself by keeping everyone at a distance. She admitted that she had been threatened by me, by the depth of my love for Michael, by the sacrifice in my history that made her own love seem shallow in comparison. "I'm sorry," she said one day, "for keeping Sophie from you, for making Michael choose between us, for treating you like you didn't matter." I could have said I forgave her, but that would have been a lie, and we had moved past the stage where polite lies served any purpose. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said honestly. "You took years from me that I can never get back, years with my son, with my granddaughter, but I understand why you did it, and maybe understanding is enough." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Maybe." Michael recovered slowly. When he was finally able to talk, really talk, I sat by his bed and he held my hand, something he hadn't done since he was a little boy. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "For everything, for being a terrible son, for taking you for granted, for almost sending you away." "Don't," I said. "Don't apologize now because you're scared. I need you to mean it, Michael. I need you to actually change, not just feel guilty." "I will," he said. "I promise I will." And part of me wanted so desperately to believe him. But part of me, the part that had been broken and betrayed too many times, quite trust the promise. Only time would tell if fear of death would translate into actual change, or if once he recovered, we'd slide back into the same patterns. He came home from the hospital a week before Thanksgiving. Sophie insisted I come for Thanksgiving dinner, the first time I'd been invited to their home in years. I went, bringing a pie I had made myself despite my shaking hands. It was awkward, it was always going to be awkward, but there was something different too, something softer. Michael moved slowly, still recovering. Jennifer was gentler, less defensive. Sophie stayed off her phone and actually participated in conversation. We sat around their dining table, the family I had almost lost, the family I had never quite had, and said grace. Michael asked me to do it, and I almost couldn't speak through my tears. "Dear God," I said, "thank you for second chances. Thank you for bringing us here together. Thank you for life, even with all its pain and complication. Thank you for love, even when it's not enough and yet somehow still everything. Amen." "Amen," they echoed. We ate and talked and laughed a little. Sophie told stories about school. Michael talked about his recovery plan. Jennifer asked about my work at the foundation. It was almost normal, almost a real family. When I left that night, Michael walked me to the car, moved slowly, his hand on my arm for support. At the car door, he hugged me tight. "I love you, Mom," he said. "I know I don't say it enough, I know I don't show it, but I do, I really do." "I know, baby," I said, using the endearment I hadn't called him in decades. "I know." I watched him walk back into his building, this man who was my son, this stranger who was my family. And I thought about Catherine's question from years ago, was it enough? These small moments, these tiny gestures of connection, were they enough to make up for all the years of loneliness and neglect? The answer was no, they weren't enough. They would never be enough. The pain I had carried for so many years didn't disappear just because of a few kind words and a Thanksgiving dinner. The damage was too deep, the scars too permanent. But maybe they were something. Maybe something was better than nothing. Maybe this was what love looked like in the wreckage, broken and incomplete, but stubbornly surviving despite everything. I went home to my empty house full of memories and ghosts. I looked at that photograph of me holding baby Michael, both of us frozen in a moment of perfect love that couldn't last, that could never last. And I cried. I cried for that young woman who had given everything. I cried for the life I had dreamed of and the reality I had got. I cried for all the years I had lost, all the love I had given that had never been fully returned. I cried for my son, my granddaughter, my dead husband, my broken heart. But then I dried my tears, made myself a cup of tea, and sat in my living room as the night deepened around me. Tomorrow, I would go to work at the foundation. I would answer phones and help people and find purpose in serving others who were suffering the same loneliness I knew so intimately. Tomorrow, I would keep living, keep fighting, keep refusing to disappear. Because that's what we do, those of us who survive. We cry and then we keep going. We break, and then we find ways to function despite the cracks. We love people who hurt us and stay connected to people who disappoint us because the alternative, complete isolation, total disconnection, is worse than the pain. Catherine once told me that maybe we couldn't get ourselves back, but we could build something new. I'm still building. At 78 years old, with shaking hands and a failing body, I'm still building a life that has meaning beyond my family's recognition of me. I'm still mattering, even if it's in small ways, even if it's just to strangers who call our foundation desperate for help. Michael is trying, Sophie is trying, even Jennifer is trying. It's not enough, it will never be enough, but it's something. And something, I've learned, is what we have to settle for. Because life doesn't give us the fairy tales we dreamed of as young women. It doesn't give us the love stories we were promised. It gives us complications and compromises and heartbreaks mixed with tiny moments of grace that we have to cling to if we want to survive. I don't know how much time I have left. A year, 5 years, 10, I don't know, but I know this. I will spend whatever time I have in my house, the house I fought to keep. I will spend it doing work that matters, helping people who need help. I will spend it connected to my son and granddaughter in whatever small ways they allow. I will spend it with Catherine, my friend who understood me in ways my family never did. And when I die, whether it's in my sleep in my own bed or in some hospital surrounded by beeping machines, I will die knowing that I fought, that I didn't go quietly, that I refused to be warehoused and forgot, that I mattered, even if only to myself, even if only in small ways. That's my legacy, not a perfect family or a great love story or a life well lived by any traditional measure. Just survival. Just stubborn, determined, heartbroken survival. And maybe in the end, that's enough. Maybe it has to be. Because I'm still here, I'm still Alith Hayes, and I'm still fighting. That's what I learned standing at my window the day Catherine's car stopped. That strangers can show you more kindness than family, that purpose can be found even in old age, that you can be broken and still refuse to shatter completely. That love isn't always enough. But somehow it's still everything. My son told me to get a job if I didn't want to go to a nursing home. So I smiled, and a car stopped, and a stranger changed my life. And I'm still here, living in my house, doing my work, loving my family from a distance that breaks my heart every single day. Still here, still fighting, still hopping against hope that maybe, just maybe, it will all mean something in the end. Even if it doesn't, I'll keep fighting anyway, because that's what mothers do. That's what survivors do. That's what I do.